Welcome back, everybody. It's Maddie Fisher here. I'm here to introduce to you Patrick Kelly and John Papp with the history of fresh produce. So, with it being Earth Day and everything, I've been thinking all day about how the ancient world went from flourishing to faltering faster than you can say famine. John, I know you like that. So, if you were wondering the same thing as me all day, then get ready to dig in the dirt of history with Patrick and John as they unravel the tales of mighty civilization brought to their knees, not by swords or scandals, but by the humble harvest that went haywire. From grain woes to agriculture woes, it's time for the boys to explore how crop failures turned once thriving empires into ancient history's cautionary tales. Take it away, boys.
Once again, thank you,
Amazing.
Maddie.
There's even some poetry in there, you know?
Hey,
You catch that?
you know what you're doing. We appreciate it. Let's get this started.
I'm trying to take your job.
Listen. It's about time somebody does.
Hello,
Once
everybody.
again, amazing
Always
as
amazing.
always.
Always amazing.
You can't beat that.
So how are you doing tonight, Patrick?
I'm doing good. I am getting ready to head to Vancouver.
That's right. You have a hard stop tonight, don't you? You've told me multiple times now. You have to get out of here.
I've been back and forth to the office all day today. Okay, I've been having to just errands and all the other things. So I'm ready though. I'm ready for this episode. I'm ready to have a little fun and to learn with everybody about the civilizations that are lost. Right, the crop failures in civilization. Right, John. That's
Yeah.
what we're really here for tonight.
We figured we'd keep it really upbeat for Earth Day and talk about,
Crop failures.
crop failures, civilizations falling apart, the end of the world. By the end of this episode, you'll really appreciate, I think, the Earth a little bit better. I think.
Well, they should.
That's our hope, at least.
Hey, I agree with you on that one.
But to all of our listeners listening live, feel free to chat. Let us know where you're listening from. We always are interested to hear where you guys are coming from and how far our reach is. Maybe you're even going to be from some of these past civilizations where they are that we're going to be touching on tonight. So do let us know.
Let us know which past civilization you're from.
Maybe they're living in the past. Maybe, who knows? Who knows? But before we get started, we'll do a quick recap of where we've been and where we're going. So you will have heard the Titanic a couple of weeks ago. A lot of you seem to have enjoyed that one, so that was good to hear. We had obviously a lot of fun as well with that. Next up, actually tomorrow, we have blueberries, the history of blueberries coming out. We're going back to our roots a little bit and talking about a specific crop. And then after that, we will have the French Revolution and then the Arab Empire. So that's what's coming up. And last week, you would have heard some exciting news that we are partnering up with Cornell. They are officially our first university sponsor of the show, right? So very exciting. We did share that more details will be forthcoming.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. But we are very excited about. There it is.
I like you're like, there it is.
Right there in your face.
And there it is.
Cornell University. So very exciting times.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
And we're excited to share more of that with you as time comes. And also coming up with news before we get started will be more information coming out about the history of Fresh Produce Club. So for all you diehard fans of listening to us talk about produce and history nonstop, there will be a loyal following of you guys if you choose to join. So also stay tuned for that.
Completely up to you. Nobody's forcing you.
No one's forcing you.
Nobody's forcing you.
So with all the all the rundowns complete, I think we can dive into our ancient worlds here and start talking about some lost civilizations.
I agree. As always, we always want to welcome our fresh produce lovers out there that are joining us, whether you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, X, or Facebook. As always, please let us know where you are, where you've been. This is obviously civilizations
Right.
lost to crop failures. So obviously, want to hear from you. Want to hear what you want to hear about as well. And if you want to check out more, we'll start uploading more videos, not just to the YouTube channel, but on the Produce Industry Podcast mobile application that you can find on the App Store or the Google Play Store. So, John, yeah, just let's get this going, and really looking forward to the HFP Club, man. This is gonna be
Oh, it's
be
gonna be fun.
fun. So
Lots of treats coming your way.
let's get this rolling so we can get everybody's night put them to bed tonight.
Listen, you're really talking about yourself, all right?
Oh yeah, okay,
Come
okay,
on.
all right. Let's the history it's starting as we speak.
All right, so we're going to dive into the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan Civilization. So, Harappans, who were the Harappans? So, the Harappans were actually one of the really the great early complex societies of the Bronze Age, probably one of the earliest civilizations that we know of in the world. And when I say early, I mean early. So the pre-Harappans, so even before they were an established society, there's traces of them as early as 8,000 years ago. And this is in present day India and Pakistan. And by the third millennium BC, they occupied over 386,000 square miles of territory. And that is much, much more than their better known contemporaries of the same time, which would be ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. So this is an enormous civilization and accounted for an estimated 10% of the world's population. So this is an enormous enterprise. Uh, so who are these people exactly? What do we know about the Harappans? So the Harappans, they developed a writing script that's still yet to be deciphered. So it's a lot of basically symbols. So think like hieroglyphs or so. And so experts and linguists are still trying to figure out what these symbols and hieroglyphs mean. Their cities contained really advanced sanitation systems for their time, and they remained unequaled until Roman times. So we're talking a 2,000-year gap. And when I say impressive sanitation systems, I would say the most notable things, if we're talking about something we want to equate to sanitation today, is each house had a toilet. Okay, so that's pretty fascinating to think of back in 3000 BC. These toilets were connected to drainage pipes that then fed into the city's sewage system. And the toilets in the homes might have very well been, again, the very first toilets in history. So, just a little bit of a fun fact about the Harappans. And so, during its peak, so the peak of the Harappans was between 2600 and 1900 BCE. The cities are believed to maintain a population of some 40,000 within pretty significantly sized and carefully planned urban centers. So this is giving you a little bit of a picture of what the Harappan society looked like. And actually, I think we even probably have some slides that will eventually appear so you can not just take my illustrative description of it, but you can see some renderings that uh, experts have designed based on their findings. So, what was the agriculture like in the Harappan civilization? So they were, for as advanced as they were in sanitation, they were also quite advanced in agricultural techniques. So they cultivated a variety of crops, including wheat, barley, peas, lentils, sesame, mustard, a vast array. And they, like sanitation, also advanced irrigation systems to harness water for agriculture. So they built these enormous canals, dikes, dams, reservoirs to control the flow of water from rivers and manage seasonal floods. So this part of the world is pretty arid, so they would really be dependent on any rainfalls that would come, mainly from the monsoons. So they would have to figure out a way to trap that water and then use it accordingly during the course of a year. Obviously, agriculture being a big piece of that. As far as the actual farming techniques and hilly and sloped areas, they practice terraced farming, constructing. And I think we've probably seen a lot of this through different civilizations. They had basically step-like fields to optimize agricultural land and prevent soil erosion. They were also creators of the plowing system. So they used wooden plows for tilling the soil and preparing it for planting crops. And they may have even practiced crop rotation to maintain soil fertility, but there's really no direct evidence for that, or it's very limited. But there are suggestions that they did do that. And they also used complex strategies for multi-cropping based on season, which basically involves a critical awareness of the varying watering regime. So a lot to do with water in this civilization. So before other civilizations were varying their crops seasonally, the Indus people were favoring rice, millet, and beans in the summer, and then wheat, barley, and pulses in the winter. And not only were these practices increasing dietary variety, but it was also providing opportunity for organization of labor and for provisioning throughout the year. So, pretty impressive organization and enterprise around agriculture. And beyond obviously the benefits of to the individual community and the variety of crops may have also been responsible for the establishment of ancient urban cities. So obviously, if you have more variety of food and more available, you're going to have more population growth and booms. And so, what happened with all these crops? Where did they all go? Because if they're growing all this, they need to also be able to store it for a certain amount of time. And they did do that. They built a substantial amount of granaries that were found across various sites in this civilization. And these granaries had raised floors. And experts believe that that was probably to protect the stored grains from moisture and pests and things like that nature. So, a very impressive civilization that again preceded the Roman Empire by 2,000 years. So, with that in mind, even more impressive. But what happened to what seems to be a very advanced, very capable civilization? So, around 1900 BC, there is evidence that the civilization started to go into decline. We see population abandoning cities, purportedly migrating to the southeast. And then by 1800 BCE, the climate is known to have changed. It became significantly cooler and drier. And obviously, two things you don't want if you live in an arid condition to begin with, because that means life starts to fade. And that was the case in these cities. Many came to a natural end as these newer settlements and climatically more friendly environments were built. So people started basically moving to better areas climatically as these new climatic conditions settled in. Now, research of today suggests that monsoon cycles essentially stopped for 2 centuries, right? So that's 2,000 years that this monsoon system that they heavily relied on just came to a pause. And that, of course, made agriculture nearly impossible. The people basically built their lives around the monsoon and the weather patterns for the bulk of the year's rainfall. Okay. And the rainfall again would happen within this 4 month period. And if you don't get that, you're not going to basically be able to control your output agriculturally speaking. So winter monsoons soon became stronger, summer monsoons became weaker. And then towards the later years of this civilization, we see again people moving from cities to villages. So it's not that the Harappan civilization collapsed per se, but it was more of a deurbanization process. Basically, we see there's actually evidence of certain sites within the valley where there was a sharp decrease in the ubiquity of wheat and barley from mature to the declining period of this empire. And this would represent a pattern when people adapted to changing monsoon patterns, something they chose not to do during previous droughts and climatic shifts. So basically, this time around, rice introduced from East Asia had become widespread alternative crops. So they were adapting to this change. But again, to make their lives easier, they started to basically move out into better climatic regions, into smaller villages, not these huge urban centers that required more resources, more energy, more stability in the climate. So again, we can't ever say exactly how a lot of these civilizations we're going to talk about tonight disappeared, but we can say with a certain degree of certainty that climate obviously had a piece of it. And that was certainly the case with the Harappan civilization. And actually, you can see in that image here, that's some of the the sites that archaeologists have been uncovering for the last, actually, I think it was started in 1920s when they first came across the ruins of the Harappan. So it's only the last 100 years that they actually discovered this civilization. So pretty fascinating site.
Definitely pretty interesting. I mean, looking at some of the things they built on stilts, and you can see these, the poles in the background. It almost makes you think of some of these mounds are probably just on the other side of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly.
it's pretty crazy. As we see the first civilization that has been lost, everyone. What did you think about that, John? Did you think that was pretty deep, or I mean, literally?
Yeah, I think I'm just impressed by the sheer size of this civilization based on when it was. I mean, you can see again in this picture the vast expanse of this urban center. And this is from 3000 BCE. I mean,
I know.
it's mind-boggling to think of. And just the advanced technologies or technologies for their time that they have with sanitation, water management. A lot of people can easily think, the
It looks
ancients.
like they lived in an oasis.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, truly did. Well, let's move on to the next one, everyone, which is going to be, and of course, John gives me this one.
Oh, you love these guys.
You're like, you know it.
You
You
love these
know it,
guys.
everyone. Let's see if we can go like, oh, hey, how you doing, John? How's everybody doing tonight? Let's talk about that. The next one is the Maya, everyone. So I think we all know the Maya. I think one of the things we can all think about when thinking about the Maya is not agriculture, but definitely we're going to talk about agriculture when it comes to the Maya, and arguably, the New World's most advanced pre-Columbian civilization. Carved large stone cities into jungles of southern Mexico and Central America. Now, they're known for their hieroglyphic writing as well as the calendar making, the mathematics, astronomy, and their architectural skills. So they reached the peak of their, I would say, their influence during the so called classic period from around AD 250 to around AD 900. Now, that kind of gives you of who the Maya are if you were to look at them on the grand scale of Father Time. And how does ag, or how does the Mayan agriculture play into a lost civilization, or these civilizations lost due to these crop failures? So you got to look at the actual ancient Mayan people. They were very clever, hardworking farmers who used a variety of techniques to raise enough food to feed large populations in their entire Maya city. So their sophistication can be compared to other ancient empires, such as even the Egyptians. So corn, or maize, as we've talked about, everyone, in the history of fresh produce, right?
Mhm.
And that was one of their main staple crops. Maize was grown together with beans and squash, as each of the three provided support to the other, kind of like three sisters.
Yep.
The Maya people use a slash and burn agriculture, a Mayan farming method where trees and other plants are first cut down. The entire area will be planted and then is burned. So the Maya would then plant in the rich ash that resulted. However, after 2 or 3 years, the soil and ash was depleted and must, be allowed to lie fallow for 5 to 15 years. So the Maya would then move on to a new area and repeat the process. So it kind of reminds me of even, the California ag. When you think about the great, the big sequoia trees, they actually need fire to be able to drop their seeds and be able to, for their seeds to split and to grow. Here's the
Mhm.
Maya civilization. So when you think of the Maya civilization, everyone, that's what you think about, right?
Oh yeah,
That's what you were thinking about, John, right?
big temples,
Right when you think of the
right?
Maya civilization. And just to show you a couple other pictures as we keep going through the Maya. This isn't the ag just yet, so pop that one back off. Pop John back. Um, let's keep moving through. Low areas like the Aztecs. The Mayan farming was comprised of farmed fields raised up from the bayous or low swampy areas. That's what we just showed you. This is what we were looking at right here. And this created these fertile farm areas by digging up the mud from the bottom and placing it on the mats made of woven needs to feed above the water level in the canals between the beds where there's fish, turtles, and other aquatic life. So you got to think this was, it was like a, geez, what do they call that, John? Where it's like you have everything right in
Yeah, what's it called? It's
one area.
It's like agroforestry almost.
Yeah, like you've got
right?
everything together with the river. You've got it all together.
Agroaquatic.
Look, the water lilies grew on top of the water, which prevented the water from drying up. The raised bed farming was quite labor intensive, but very productive. Each field provided 2 or 3 crops a year. It's almost like hydroponic farming, too.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah.
If you look at it,
Looks like that Disney World ride.
Yeah, it's all the
Living
Disney
Lands,
World
right?
rides.
Whatever it's called.
It's all the Disney World rides. Then they had mountain areas. So this was another cool one. For Maya farming in mountain areas, the Maya made terraces on the steep hills, so you can see as it's like looking at you're going up steps. Small fields are cut into a hillside and held with a retaining wall. These create a series of steps that reduce water runoff and erosion, and that can be planted with maize or with other crops. Row crops is a perfect example. These terraces make the most productive use of mountains or like hilly land. Here too, the Maya used canals to irrigate the crops. Now, that's another thing that with oranges in California, they'll grow on the hills as well to use the weather, right? The patterns of the wind to grow different sizes. Next, this is one. John, you got to help me with the name of this. The Yaknakak, or the Maya's major city.
I think so.
Yaknaka. They had some sense of conservation. Let's see if we got a picture of that one in here. Do we, John?
I don't think we have the Yaknaka, no.
I don't think we do. Yeah, it's still loading. So, and they had some sense of conversation. They had an ongoing need for fuel. So they manage the forest very carefully. And the intimate natural disasters such as droughts or man-made ones like the depletion of resources that required resilience and creative solutions. So its inhabitants likely ran into environmental problems at different times. Okay, so problems that they likely included periods of insufficient forest resources, soil loss. However, these people sought to solve the problems as well, including construction, soil conservation terraces, anything through kind of like forest management, everyone. And because of the way their hydroponic land was built, or how they built it, they had to get innovative in the way that they kept growing on the land, excuse me. So researchers theorized that the pine savanna was a byproduct of the ancient Maya slash and burn ag, or perhaps the Maya might have cultivated pine for use as fuel that could be used or traded. Fuel was very important to them. They cooked their food every single day. They required a lot of wood for their hearths. So some foods favored by the Maya, particular beans, had to be boiled to remove toxins and make them palatable.
Yeah. It's like the potatoes with the Incans. Remember, they also had to treat them in a certain way because they were toxic naturally. So they would have to work with them. And same thing here with the Maya and the beans.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you're probably wondering, where's the collapse at? Well, that's where we come to. The end of the classic period and one of history's great enigmas. The populace suddenly deposed its king, abandoned the cities, and seized with technological innovation. Although some northern cities continued to flourish, guess what? The majority of Maya centers began to collapse during the 9th and 10th centuries AD. Intercity relations sourced, warfare increased, trade declined, and the death rate rose. Some historians pointed out to major drought exacerbated by deforestation and soil erosion as that impetus of the societal collapse, while others put the blame on a disease, epidemic, and peasant revolt against an increasingly corrupt ruling class. Constant warfare among the various city-states, a breakdown of trade routes, or some combination. Therefore, who knows, right? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
One hypothesis backed by climate simulations is that the long drought combined with slash and burn farming techniques is what destroys the forest upon which the Maya relied. So they brought disaster right to their doorstep. They caused it themselves suddenly. Once wealthy city centers became deserted wastelands, and some Maya died, and others scattered to a variety to be more fertile mountain lands and to the south. So by the time Spain fully conquered the Maya around 1524, the majority of the Mayas, most important cities, John, guess what?
Already gone.
They were already gone, everyone. What do you think?
Easy work. Yeah,
Oh,
it's.
Oh,
I
look,
mean,
there you go. We'll make you big, me small. That's me in the corner. We said that earlier.
no karaoke tonight now.
Oh, sorry, my bad. We
Come
were
on,
not
you,
allowed.
you got to go, right?
No carpool karaoke tonight, everyone.
No, but I look, we've already talked about two civilizations, and there are some parallels there. So we had droughts, we had basically the existing people moving to another area that was more hospitable. So we're already seeing some parallels here between the two, but we're only halfway-ish done. So
You want to know why?
They're back. The Vikings.
The Vikings
If you didn't have enough Vikings,
are back.
but this isn't the Vikings. These are the Greenland Vikings. So
Oh,
it's
sure.
a specific group of Vikings. And I think we all know Greenland, and that Greenland, at least the way we know it today, is not very green. Or it might be becoming green again, but it's mostly not green. So what about these Greenland Vikings? Now, the Greenland Vikings, so according to Icelandic sagas, Eric the Red, which was a Viking, or as we learned from our expert, Viking is a verb, so it was a Norseman, led a fleet of 25 boats to colonize Greenland around 985 AD. And this was basically as a result of him temporarily being banished from Iceland for manslaughter. So kind of not a good situation why he left, but that's how it goes. He discovers Greenland during a time that is known in history as the medieval warm period, which lasted roughly from 900 to 1300 AD. And as the name implies, basically this is a historically or more than a warmer than average climate during this period. So Greenland would have looked and felt a lot different than it does today. Once the Vikings showed up in Greenland, they set up two colonies, a larger eastern settlement and then a smaller western settlement. And what did these Vikings do? They herded goats, sheep, cattle. They built stone churches, which you can actually still see today, the ruins of. And they also hunted caribou and seals. So that was the main, basically, features of the Vikings in Greenland in terms of what they were rearing in terms of livestock and building and things like that. That's not to say that they weren't doing agriculture and cultivation of fruits and vegetables. We're going to get into that. They did. Now, thriving or at least surviving for hundreds of years, this civilization on Greenland had their population grow to roughly 5,000. Obviously not a huge amount, but pretty significant considering the climate and the environment that they were exposed to and had to settle in. Now, when a missionary expedition arrives to Greenland in 1721, with, of course, the intention of converting all those folks to Protestantism, they found nothing but ruins. So they are gone for sure by 1721. Since today, archaeologists have determined that the Western settlements failed around 1400 AD and the Eastern settlement was abandoned just a few decades after that. But before we get into why that may have all happened, let's talk a little bit about their agriculture. So we know from our previous episode all about the Vikings that the Norse people had a tradition for farming. And of course, they arrived to Greenland with this tradition intact, going back thousands of years. But they had to adapt to this new environment. Now, researchers believe that the Vikings probably grew barley in small quantities. And again, if you heard our last episode on the Vikings, barley was a critical crop in their diet. And again, so they grew this in small quantities compared to with large billowing cornfields that we have today, and sowed barley in small enclosures that were no bigger than the ability to irrigate the corn and keep hungry animals out. So very small sustenance sized farming exercises going on here. Now, the Greenland climate, like I mentioned, was a bit warmer than it is today. And so the southernmost tip of the island, to paint a picture, was luscious, it was green, and naturally an environment that like that would have tempted Eric the Red and his followers to settle. And so they cultivated what they could on that site. Now, they also, of course, tried to grow other crops besides barley, and their attempts to grow these crops did not last very long, however, because the climate did start to cool over the next couple centuries until the Little Ice Age started. So we went from the medieval warm period, and eventually the Little Ice Age is going to kick in while these Greenland Vikings are in Greenland. So, what exactly happened to these unfortunate Vikings? So, the Little Ice Age sets in around 14th century, and we can assume and feel pretty certain that this was a contributing factor to this civilization's downfall. Besides the obvious things that it got colder and drier and all these things, the weather also clogged the route in and out of Greenland with sea ice, and of course, shortened the growing seasons, which were already highly erratic to begin with. So, and I say the sea ice is critical because they did rely, it appears, on imports from back home being Scandinavia, so Denmark, Sweden, Norway, that sort of region. So, if boats couldn't go in and out, there isn't going to be a lot of imports or exports going back and forth. Now, if we're talking about what they were growing, again, the barley and corn and things like that, that needs a long growing season. And if that season is too short, you can't harvest the seed for the next season. So that's a big problem. So at some point, the Vikings were no longer able to maintain the seed production for their food and drink, and that made it more difficult for them to survive, of course. Now, researchers have found that southern Greenland's climate became progressively drier during the Norse period, and the Vikings made the most of the harsh winters by supplementing low crop yields with food from ocean and trading goods, sorry, for dried foods and wood until at the point where boats couldn't go through anymore. Now, Greenland's already challenging conditions would have made drought that much harder to survive. Again, the remoteness and what they were trading to get food back into their settlements would have been ivory from walrus tusks. That was their main export. That's what they used to trade for dry foods and timber and all these things. And if it wasn't bad enough that the Little Ice Age was kicking in, the value of the ivory tusks were also waning because elephant ivory was expanding. So you had a flood of supply of ivory in the marketplace, essentially. So a lot of not good things happening with the Greenland Vikings during this period. So according to written sources, the Vikings in Greenland were last heard of in 1408. And after that, they just disappeared. And no one, again, these are all theories what I just described. No one knows for certain, but those are our best guesses.
Nobody knows for certain.
Nope.
Dun, dun, dun.
That's the story of the Greenland Vikings.
That's the story, and we're sticking to it. Man, another civilization lost to crop failures. Well, let's keep moving through. The next one is the Cahokia, everyone. That's the Cahokia civilization. So just to kind of give you an idea on who are the Cahokia, an Algonquian-speaking Native American tribe and member of the Illinois Confederation. So one settlement in modern-day Illinois had a population of 20,000 at its peak around 1100 to 1150 AD, which that's a pretty decent time. Little 50 years. Hey, that's good for back then. All right, just saying. Settlement was situated along a floodplain that provided fertile soil for ag, with nearby hickory forest to provide wood and other raw materials, as well as wildlife to hunt. So the Cahokia also had convenient access to the nearby Mississippi River, which its residents, people known as the Mississippian culture, navigated in large dugout canoes. So, like a modern city with suburbs, Cahokia's outer edge was a residential area consisting of houses made from sapling frames lined with clay walls and covered by prairie grass and roofs, as you can see here. This is a mound, the Cahokia Mound. More than 100 mounds extended more than miles outside the wall in all directions. Some served as bases for what probably were important communities buildings, while other cone-shaped mounds probably functioned as burial sites. At the center was, let's see if we got other pictures. There's some good other pictures of the land too, everyone. So at the center was the 100-foot tall Monk's Mound, the largest earth mound in northern, what was that? Sorry. Sorry, that was in the North America in Illinois. And you know, everyone, what's crazy about this, it's just outside between, I would say, Collinsville and St. Louis. John, one thing I can tell you is that I have walked up Monk's Mound. I've been on Cahokia Mound. I've been there, and I've seen these massive mounds that are pretty much in awe. Just like you see here, it looks very big from the road, but you know, you start walking up these mounds, and it's pretty amazing. So
there's many of them, right? There's
what's that?
There's several of them.
There's
right?
several of them. I was at, I went to Cahokia Mound. I've been on, saw Monk's Mound. Like I said, I've been up on Monk's Mound. All of it. It's awesome. It's amazing. So from the top of the mound, one could take a panoramic view of the Cahokia and its surrounding realm. Just outside the wall, a ring of red cedar posts dubbed Woodhenge likely served as a sort of solar calendar. One of the most remarkable things about Cahokia is that it appears to have been carefully planned around 1100 AD, with a rectangular-shaped grand plaza whose core design mirrors the native vision of the cosmos, which is kind of cool. Let's see if we got... do we have that? Oh, there. I walked there. There it is. I've been to the top of this. This is the Cahokia
there you
Mound.
Go.
I actually, if you go on my LinkedIn page, you can actually find me walking up this video right here. And then we go all the way to the top. We do some videos at the top with Severin. So that's pretty cool. So that mound is it's actually a tough trek to walk up too.
Looks like it.
It actually is. So the events that led to the deliberating building of the Cahokia and the rapid growth of its population remain unclear. So that's a lot. So that the Cahokia people in general, and it got me thinking while I was kind of going through some of the bullets we had about walking up that mound, and still to this day, if you look at this, everybody, that's what it looks like. And if you go back, if we look at this picture,
just like that,
it looks exactly the same.
Yeah,
it looks exactly the same to this day. Oh, let's keep going to the next one. So let's look at the Cahokia and agriculture, though, everyone, because that's what we want to talk about. So agriculture practices were fundamental in the Cahokia success, okay? So the city's inhabitants cultivated a diverse array of crops. But, John, what was it?
There's always maize.
Maize
There's always maize.
Was a primary staple of the average diet. The Cahokians' production of maize was crucial, as its large-scale cultivation allowed Cahokia to support a large population. The people of Cahokia also developed agricultural techniques such as the Three Sisters farming method. Many farmers had considerable influence and decision-making authority, and they were valued for their economic contributions, their skills, and their expertise in all matters related to soils and crops. Cahokian ag was so successful that the city's prosperity may have attracted migrants from across the region. Using an isotopic analysis of human bones at Cahokian grave sites, archaeologists have found that up to 30% of the population weren't native to the area. So pottery made in the artistic style of the non-Mississippian culture The groups using the Cahokian clay add weights to the argument that people were migrating to the Cahokia from as far as the Ohio River Valley. So the Cahokian cultivators have been lost. Wild varieties yield much smaller, less nutritious seeds than those that fed the cities. Yet ghosts of indigenous agriculture remains. Cucurbita pepo gourds, likely domesticated by early Native Americans, continue to grow wild in the river valleys near the site. So many ag involved in the Cahokia people, John.
Yeah, it's seems like it was a destination city too.
It was.
I mean, you have all these
listen, if you
30%. I mean, that's a lot.
yeah, 100%. So how did they collapse? Right? You're probably wondering.
That's the
You're like,
question.
well, how did all
Definitely no more Cahokians. That mound looked pretty empty. So
the mound was empty. Stop. So the Cahokians decline, which began around 1250 or 1300 AD, and cultivated in the sites abandonment by 1350. And similarly, it is like a mystery. It was just gone. A recent study suggests that settlement's demise was linked to climate change, since a decrease in rainfall would have affected the Mississippians' ability to grow their staple crop of maize. Others link that the sheer size and diversity of the Cahokian population may have led to irreconcilable rifts. Another theory is based on the fact that the civilization allegedly began declining right when a calamitous flood is known to have hit around 1200 AD. In addition to the flood, researchers have run a finger over exploitation of natural resources, political and social unrest, diseases, and so-called Little Ice Age possible causes for the Cahokians' fall. So there was just a few, I would say, disasters that really threw them to the wolves.
yeah, just another example of this time again, decreased rainfall. Can't grow your staple crops, overpopulation potential. So, yeah.
All right, and last but not least, everyone.
Everyone knows this place. Everyone knows this place. We're talking about Rapa Nui, which people today probably recognize as Easter Island. So the big statues that we've all familiar with. So this is a fascinating one. This is going to be the last civilization of the evening that we're going to touch on. And there's a surprise at the end. I'm not going to tell you. So you got to listen. So let's talk about the Rapa Nui. So the island is technically speaking a single massive volcano rising over 10,000 feet from the Pacific Ocean floor. So massive volcano. Now, setting out from Canoe sometime between 300, experts think now more likely towards 1200 AD, you have Polynesians that somehow find and settle this island. One of the world's most remote places. Okay, this island is located about 2,300 miles west of Chile. That is about a 5.5-hour flight, I think. They said that, something like that. So that's the closest landmass to this island. So really in the middle of nowhere. Now, when these Polynesians arrived, this island was covered with trees, as many as 16 million of them, some towering as high as 100 feet. And these Polynesians, and we've talked about the Polynesians a few times already on our previous episodes, when we were talking on our Disney Lights live stream about Moana, and there was another, Hawaii, of course. So the Polynesians were farmers, as we would have discussed previously, and they would have brought a lot of things with them on these huge canoes that they sailed. So for those that are not as familiar with the Polynesians, they would basically have these 2-hull canoes that were basically strapped together, that would go pretty fast. They would have double masts on each side. So these were impressive ships for their time, and were really the most successful mariners of their period in early history. And they were also pretty brilliant in terms of what they packed. So they would bring with them small animals that were easily transportable. So we're talking chickens. We're talking rats. Yes, they brought rats on purpose. The rats were something that they ate. It wasn't something considered of high status. It was a commoner kind of food, but it was easy to transport and easy to cook. And apparently, from what I read, they taste similar to rabbit. If you're curious what rat tastes like, so those were, sometimes it takes small dogs as well. So they were very intentional with what they brought in terms of livestock or animals, but they also brought plants. They would bring sweet potato, breadfruit, bananas, uh, and again, they would bring basically clippings of these plants as well, so that they could actually cultivate these plants once they arrived wherever they were going. So these Polynesians brought these along with them. Like I said, these settlers were farmers by trade. They practiced slash and burn agriculture. So naturally, when they got to these islands, they would start chopping down trees, opening the spaces, and to begin farming. Now, despite lacking wheels or pack animals and all those sorts of things, they still managed to erect hundreds of these giant stone statues, which are called moai, which is in Polynesian is basically statue. And these statues were sculpted out of volcanic rock, and the largest of which stood, I believe, around 32 feet tall and weighed 82 tons. So these are massive, massive stones. Uh, Archaeologists have theorized that these statues represented family lineage and prosperity, meanings that they continue to carry for contemporary people, but they had little concrete proof. So, a recent study by an American archaeologist by the name of Joanne Van Tilburg and her archaeological team has helped fill in these gaps. So, by testing the soil of the area where these massive statues were quarried, they found evidence that the statues not only symbolized prosperity, but that the very creation of these statues contributed to agricultural abundance. So the analysis suggests that sweet potatoes, bananas, and the like had grown nearby in soil that was very rich in calcium and phosphorus. And for any listeners out there that know soil very well, you know that those are very important minerals for fertile soil and growing for ag. So on an island with limited resources, where the rest of the soil had long been depleted after the people have been there for some time, the presence of this fertile soil was pretty stunning to find. But before we go down too much down that road, let's just talk about what agriculture on the island was like. So most of the agriculture took place on Pony Peninsula, which is an area that's now suffering from gully erosion, but soil erosion did not play a role on the island for the first 700 years of settlement. But agricultural land use gradually changed from agroforestry to open land monoculture. And of course, that has led to severe erosion of the natural soil base. Now, like I said, these were farmers by trade. They practiced slash and burn and cutting down forests to make clearings for farming. So naturally, the palm forest began to shrink on this island. And for those that, again, understand farming and things of that nature, once you have little to no trees left, especially in an island setting, that's a very big problem. So eventually there are no more trees left. And what that means is that you have the ocean winds that just start to blow across the whole island. Again, this is a small island. It's very small. So not only do you have wind blowing across the island, but you also have seawater kind of traveling along with the wind. So this wind is obviously eroding the topsoil as well as adding salts to the soil, which are not good things for fertility when it comes to growing crops. So what did the indigenous peoples of Rapa Nui do? They're actually pretty brilliant. They basically started building small gardens, which were gardens of yams, sweet potatoes, taro, and the like, in enclosures with stones and boulders. And what these stones and boulders did, which is another term for is rock mulching, is it protected the plants from the winds. It prevented evaporation of the rainwater when the rain would fall. And of course, it would deter weed growth and boost soil nutrients. And how did that boost soil nutrients, you're wondering? Well, when the water hit these rocks and the water would kind of run off these rocks, there would be mineral in the rocks and it would travel with the water into the soil. So it would boost actually the soil quality. And this tactic really allowed the island society to thrive and sustain its society of social classes, including artisans who actually carved these giant sculptures after the palm forests had been destroyed. So, according to some archaeologists, the soil was actually potentially even richer and more vibrant after they cut down all the trees, because of this practice that they did, which is pretty incredible. Now, coming back to Van Tilburg, the American archaeologist, so her team has spent the past 5 years excavating Rano Raraku, which is the main quarry on the island center. And this quarry accounts for about 90% of the rocks used for these moai, these huge statues. And so the soil tested in that area, like I mentioned, suggested that these crops had grown nearby. And the soil test contained high concentrations of rich clay that forms when these local bedrock is exposed to the elements. So as the miners were carrying these rocks out, her team believes that mineral fragments mixed with the local soil acted as kind of like a fertilizer. So as these people are carrying out these statues, they're actually fertilizing the soil even more, which is why they had pretty good fertile soil in the area in and around this quarry. Now, because of all that, of course, it is believed that the people here thought that maybe these rock moai stone statues became essentially a representative and a sign of fertility, because obviously where they were, there seemed to have been good crop development and harvest. So there seems to be a theory there now that they also represented fertility of the land. So this is in stark contrast to a lot of other theories about what these stone creatures were and what they were used for and all these things. And the common theory for many years has been that the Easter Island civilization crashed because of civil war, because of starvation, because these people cared more about building all these statues rather than doing other more important things. And that is not really true. It's more of the European kind of perspective on what they expect a less superior civilization in their mind to have succumbed to. But recent research has shown that actually, as I was just describing with their innovations and stuff, is that they were actually quite impressive when it came to figuring out how to evolve and adapt to the situations that they were in. It was very common in the 1960s and 50s. There was a big movement, of course, about um, what is it, like sustainability almost, and people wanted to believe that the Easter Island was a perfect example that if you overexpand and over farm and do all these things, that the environment will collapse, and if the environment collapses, that humanity will collapse. But that's not what happened here. The Easter Islands people did not collapse because of crop failure. So this is where the surprise I was telling you about. What seems to have happened is the human population probably reached about a maximum of 3,000 people, perhaps a bit higher by around 1350 AD, and remained pretty stable until you have Europeans arrive. Now, the first Europeans that arrive are a Dutch crew led by a Jacob Roggeveen, who arrived in 1722. And he even notes in his journals that most of the island trees were gone. But still, people seem to be thriving. They weren't hungry. They weren't storming his ship and his crew asking for food. If anything, they were actually offering food to these sailors that had appeared out of nowhere to them. And so there was no signs of starvation there. What seems to have happened is once you have one European there, more Europeans start showing up. And with that, you have diseases that were introduced to this very small island. And naturally, these diseases started to take a toll on the population of Easter Island. And if that wasn't bad enough, you start to also have next in about the mid 1800s, you have Peruvian slave raiders come to the island to take the Rapa Nui people from the islands and bring them back to Peru as slaves. And so about by the late 1870s, the number of native islanders numbered only around 100. And in 1888, the island was formally annexed by Chile, which it still remains part of that country today. So, contrary to the notions that the Easter Island civilization was a result of ecocide, basically, the fall of a civilization or of a people due to overexerting the environment. What really happened here was introduction of European disease and slave trade and all of that sort of action. The Easter Island people were actually very innovative, very aware of the challenges that they were experiencing, and did a quite an impressive job adapting to it, and probably would have gone on to survive. Again, they would have never become this enormous civilization, but they would have been stable, and who knows, may have even continued today. So that's the story of Easter Island. We finished on a positive note that they didn't collapse because of crop failure, even though for many, many, many years, Europeans and the Western world believed that to be the case. But it was the Europeans basically and their acts that contributed to their demise. So
I love that.
there you have it. So we had to end a little bit on a happy note that it's not just all not all crop failures. Even though it might seem like a crop failure this time, it was not a crop failure.
It was not at all a complete. Let's say a complete crop failure. How about that? It wasn't complete crop failure.
No,
because that's what it is about. I'm happy with that. What we had some good people on here. I was trying to respond. Some of my comments don't ever show up in the chat for some reason because it only goes through Restream versus some of the other chat rooms. So depending on where you're at, you'll have to chat with you direct through like YouTube or direct through LinkedIn. One of the things I also put up there, John, is that we'll be working with is, the QR code. So everybody check that out. Boom.
Ooh, that's new.
Okay. So this one right here. Okay. That's going to be your support the show. Okay. The one right there, John,
My side.
with his on John's side. If you go ahead and scan that one's going to pull up the Produce Industry podcast website. So you'll be able to get on-demand episodes right when you log on. It's just not even a half a scroll down. And then, like I said, if you want to support the show, the more dollars we get, the more fun we get to have. And even try to come to you live at a trade show and learn more about the history of one of those cities. So we'll see that. And then, some other things that we are going to have fun with too, everyone, that I just wanted to show John is that we've been adding is, again, I'm going to say it over again, which is the club. Okay. So we're getting ready, everyone. So I say join the club today because guess why? It's coming soon. Right, John? Like, do we need to make it any more clear than that? Like,
there will be details coming out. What the different
it's coming.
Treats look like.
Remember, very
all the incentives you need to
very soon. So again, look for the logo history, fresh produce with John Papp. Again, keep your eye out for that education page as we were talking about because it's going to be updated very soon. You're going to see some updates from Cornell. So again, if you need to download that app, go to the Apple App Store on your phone or the Google Play Store on your Android. Download it. Make sure you have the Produce Industry Podcast. It is not that little purple app on your phone, on your Apple iPhone. No, it is the App Store. You got to download this. And that's where all the on-demand content is, where you'll see press releases, you'll see content from other companies, and then you'll soon see the history of fresh produce. So I just want to make sure that everybody's up to date. Download the app and stay up to date about what's going on. We got a lot of cool updates. We got a lot of fun updates. If you're interested, you can throw another QR code up there for you. Again, if you scan that, it's going to take you right to the website. And we've got other QR codes that take you right to the YouTube channel so you can watch all of these episodes over and over again, John.
Oh, that's isn't that amazing? You can
I
just
know.
on replay.
Right?
Also, make sure you send questions. We like your questions. We did on our last episode last week, on our bonus episode, we did answer finally some questions. So do send us your questions, historyoffreshproduce@gmail.com, and we will do our best to address those questions on a future episode. And we are also, I should mention also, I forgot to mention this, we are also on TikTok now, History of Fresh Produce. So check us out there as well. We're going everywhere.
HFP.
Everywhere.
HFP, baby. HFP.
Now you have to go to sleep, don't you?
Yep, I'm out. I'm going to Vancouver. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Look more on the horizon for Cornell University and more to come from there. So, John, appreciate you, man. Everyone, thanks for joining tonight.
Sleep well, everybody. Good night.